Hey Seahawks, thank you for joining us for another Student Live. As always, if you have any questions or comments about today's segment, feel free to drop them right down below. We are literally just a couple weeks away from Election Day and votes are already being counted. So today we are talking about what to expect as we keep approaching that November 3rd date. And so with me today to discuss that, I have two very special guests.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Stephen Balforan. I'm a part-time lecturer at Broward College. I'm from Connecticut, and my field is politics and pretty much law. And I look forward to having a great dialogue on the election 2020, very important election for all Americans, and have a chance to understand and dialogue some of the issues we face, obviously, within the next 2 weeks, and looking at the campaigns, the political parties, the president, and obviously the candidates, and have a chance to dialogue among all ourselves some of the issues and some of the concerns we have as American citizens. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm a student at Broward College North. I'm in my second year of my Political Science Associate of Arts degree, and I'm president of the Political Science Association on North Campus. We just like to talk about everything there is politics, and obviously the upcoming election is a really big thing. Everyone needs to go out and make sure they get out to vote and do it knowledgeably. So, yeah.
Awesome. I am super excited to have both of you with us today. We have lots to go over and a limited amount of time for our students. But before we jump into today's topic, of course, I want to know, how are the two of you doing? Especially Professor Balforan, you're in another state some of the time. So curious to know how the past 8 months have been treating both of you.
Well, I'm clearly excited to be living in South Florida. Finally, I dodged a winter, the cold winter, the minus 20 degrees we have in Connecticut. So I'm excited to be part of Broward College. I am excited to be part of South Florida. I look forward to obviously contributing today to your show and many of your shows. You have been doing an excellent job, and thanks for having me.
I've been doing well. It's just me and my family bunkered down for the last couple months. A lot of puzzles, a lot of cooking, board games, like everybody else. It's been an interesting time, but overall can't complain.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been an interesting time, and it just continues to get more and more interesting, especially the closer that we get to Election Day. And so, Professor Balforan, I'm curious to know from your opinion, especially from teaching political science, what are some of the things, either tools, resources, tips, tricks that we can start to provide our students in this small window that's kind of left for them before voting day?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good question. I try to convey to all my students, whether in Connecticut or at Broward College or even at FIU, to have a chance to register to vote. I think that's a constitutional right we have. First and foremost, we need to, get our students to understand the political process by obviously registering to vote first and foremost. I think it's important that we take part in the process because our voice needs to be heard and every student, every vote must count. So in my classes at BC, at Broward College, I talk about the importance of voting. It's a constitutional right we have. Many countries don't have this right. People have died for this right. Look at the Voting Rights Act of 1965. African Americans are people who died for this right. So it's important that we come out. It's important that we encourage our students, number one, to understand the political process, and two, to exercise a fundamental right in American democracy, that is the right to vote.
Absolutely. And of course, October 5th was a deadline for students who were looking to register for this upcoming election, but that does not mean that they still cannot register for future elections, obviously, but hopefully they all jumped on that date that just recently passed and that they are ready and excited to cast their vote, whether that's through their mail-in ballot or live in person, or doing early voting at the polls as well. And so there's obviously been lots of controversy this election cycle in terms of the different mechanisms that you can vote and which one is the safest or which one is the smartest. Can you shed some light on that for us?
Yeah, that's a very important question. There's a number of controversies around the mail-in ballot, which have been existed for how many decades. And it's always been a fundamental right we've used. Military folks overseas have mailed their ballots, and our current president has always voted that way. But for whatever reason, it's a number of reasons actually based on COVID-19, a lot of controversies around mail-in ballot. And it surrounds the main goal of whether my ballot will reach and whether it'll be counted. There was an interesting study just did by CBS where they mail 100 ballots out and 97% of the ballots reach the voters in 2 or 3 days. So obviously there's success whether it can be mailed out and whether it will arrive. The United States Postal Service are obviously overwhelmed by these ballots, and they clearly articulate that they will get all the ballots out and all the ballots back in. So that controversy around mail-in ballot, I think it's obviously it's something to be concerned about, but we should also, take advantage of the absentee ballot, take advantage of going to polls to vote. That should not deter us, okay? We're going to have the ballots counted. They're going to reach out probably on time. But let's not forget the eye on the prize is to exercise our constitutional right. We want to encourage students at BC to take care right and obviously exercise it right. So again, ballots is always a major concern. COVID-19 is a second concern. People are kind of scared to go to polls at the high school, middle schools, and the polling stations, not only in South Florida, but also in Connecticut. And there's lines are much longer. So I did a talk show a couple of days ago, and we talked about the lines normally being long for elections. It's going to be even longer because we have to do social distancing. 6 feet. Polls are going to be open a little bit earlier, and we're going to have some issues of whether you can actually cast your vote. If the line is closed and 8 o'clock comes around, you can't cast a vote. This is why I think the ballot is something that we really have to exercise and take advantage of. The ballots will be counted. States are given 10 days up to November 10th, I believe, in some states to get your ballot counted. So we have a number of issues, but obviously we've always overcome issues here in the United States. That's what makes us great. COVID-19 is not going to stop us from exercising our fundamental right. And I think I'm quite confident, like many Americans are, and the students of Broward College are, with the United States postal system. I believe the ballots will be on time and there'll be very little controversies at the end of the day. So let's exercise our right, Broward College.
Absolutely. I got mine here with me, so I'm ready to rock already. I'm curious to know, Emily, though, specifically from your perspective, because whether or not students are aware, we've kind of mentioned this at a couple of our programs now to reinforce this, but our millennial population and Generation Z, which is predominantly like the two greatest populations that we have attending Broward College, across the United States, they could account for 40% of the vote. That is a substantial number, a huge influence that they could have, not just on the upcoming presidential election, but obviously on upcoming elections over the next 2 to 4 years. So, but I don't know if you have your absentee ballot as well, or if you've gotten a chance to look online about what the issues consist of. But I want to know from your perspective as a student, aside from the local representatives or from the presidential candidates that we can vote for, some of the constitutional amendments that stood out to you that students should be paying attention to that are on this year's ballot.
Yeah, so there are going to be 6 constitutional amendments for the Florida Constitution on this upcoming ballot, but really there are 3 to pay attention to: number 2, 3, and 4. So number 2 is a really, really big one. It's titled Raising Florida's Minimum Wage. It's pretty self-explanatory, but its action is a bit more complicated. So if we pass this, you need 60% of the vote to pass it. And if we all went out and voted for it and it passed, what would happen is next year on September 31st, the minimum wage would shoot up to $10. And every year after that, September 30th. Every year after that, it would raise $1. So in 2026, we'd finally hit $15, at which point that increase would stop and we'd go to what we currently have now, which is adjusting for inflation, which is like a dime a year. It's nothing significant. And this would help us really adjust, because right now, a full-time minimum wage worker would bring home less than $18,000 a year. And so we really have to balance the economic effects of raising the minimum wage, which would raise wage costs, with, are these people making a living wage for their work? And it's something to really consider, because it would impact the Florida economy over the next 6 or so years. And after that, significantly. Amendment 3 is on the primary elections. So for all statewide elections, we're talking governor, our attorney general, our state legislators. This amendment, if passed, would open up the primaries. So right now we're closed. That means Democrats vote on the Democratic candidates in the primary and Republicans vote on the Republican candidates. One person from each party wins and they battle it out in the general election. This would change it. It'd be a pool. Everybody could vote on every candidate, and the 2 people that get the most votes, they battle it out. We could have 2 Republicans, we could have 2 Democrats, we don't know. But the important thing here is that about 26% of voters in Florida are unregistered or unaffiliated with one of the main 2 parties. And this would bring them into the fold. It would allow them a vote in the primary and allow them more of a say. And then there's Amendment 4. So Amendment 4 is kind of an interesting one. It's titled Voter Approval for Constitutional Amendments, which doesn't say much. But what the amendment actually does is it would mean you'd have to vote twice. Voters in Florida would have to approve a constitutional amendment twice before it actually amends the Constitution. So everything we're voting on here in about a month, if the voters passed it and this amendment passed, you'd vote on it again. Now, not these amendments specifically, because it wouldn't go into effect for a few years, but it makes you vote twice, and you really have to think, is there a reason for that? Why are we being questioned? Why are we being asked to reaffirm our votes? And is it a good thing? Should we check ourselves? But yeah, those are the three to look out for.
And that last one that you just mentioned, historically, right, it has only been the one vote, and that is what has propelled change, right?
Yes. Yeah, this would definitely make it harder for changes to be implemented, but it's definitely going to reaffirm public opinion. It would make sure, if you vote for it twice, the populace really wants it. You have to consider, we can repeal things. So do we need to vote twice? If we decide we don't like something, we have the power to repeal it. So really decide if it's worth adding this extra roadblock to getting our voices heard. And if you think it is, then you vote for it.
I think you actually, Emily, you bring up a really good point, which is that when it comes to not only just the candidates, but also the issues that are listed on the ballot, the research piece is so critical, especially, like I said, for younger populations. This might be a lot of people's first election voting. And so, like, one of the things that we can't emphasize enough for students is doing that educational deep dive, digging to see what tools, what resources are out there to further educate you about what are these issues and what are the pros and the cons to both sides, because that's really what makes you an informed voter. Yeah. Professor Bachman, are there any tools or resources that you typically share with students to make them that more informed citizen come election cycles?
Sure. I want to first of all piggyback on something Emily said on one of the constitutional amendment, the one where 26% of Floridians are independent and sort of feel isolated when it comes to, obviously, I can't participate in the process because I'm not a registered Republican or a Democrat. I did a survey with my students here at Broward College last year, and obviously this class. They're about 18 to 24 age, my students, and a lot of them were registered to vote. So that's very good. A lot of them shared some of the concerns Emily had when it came to, obviously, not being allowed to vote in the primaries. And one of the things I found out with my students is that they were so defranchised from the process. They felt that their vote didn't count. I think it's imperative that we let the students know to obviously to go out and vote. This amendment Emily mentioned is a very important element. We need to give people a voice. So if we have 26% of Floridians who are registered independent and probably will not vote in a primary, that defeats the democracy our founding fathers built. So when I ask my students, I say, how do you get engaged? To answer your question, Stephanie, how do I get my students engaged in the political process? I try to get them to be fair and impartial at both candidates. I ask to look at the issues, research the issues, whether it's immigration, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's American foreign policy, whether it's domestic policy. Look and see where they stand on each issue, and then apply those those issues to your personal life. Ask yourself, are you better off you were today than you were 4 years ago? And what can you do better? What you can do is simply exercise the vote. So I try to engage my students to do research. You keep mentioning the word research, to look at both candidates, whether at the local level, whether at the national level, or whether at the federal level. We have our government election in 2 years from now, and obviously we have our state representative election coming up. And let's see what our state reps do. Let's see who they are. Let's hold them accountable. One of the fundamentals of our democracy is if we are unhappy with our political process, we cast a ballot, not a bullet, a ballot. And that's very important in our democracy. And I try to engage my students to do some research, look at the amendments Emily talked about. I'm going to mention it to my class when I see them tomorrow, and have a chance to see why 26% of Floridians are independent and why so many Floridians distrust the political system. It's very important that we educate our students about participating and taking advantage of the constitutional right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another piece in terms of not just the research, like we know that we can go online, information's at our fingertips, and we do encourage students to do that. Look for credible news resources, lean on your professors who can educate you about some of these issues or some of your other mentors in your life. But to actually to focus on Emily's experience, I think one of the other pieces that we kind of harp on in student life is that student engagement piece, that peer-to-peer knowledge base. And so, Emily, I'm curious to know from your perspective, what kind of influence or benefits that you feel like you've received because of your engagement in a student organization that is obviously very politically inclined, and the students that are voracious for information about what is happening, like I said, at the local level, state level, and the national level, and like what that's meant to you to be a part of that organization.
So you're referring to the Political Science Association, which I'm president of, and what's really great about the North Campus Political Science Association, which is the one that I run, is it's discussion based. We don't sit here and we try not to lecture or just give out our point of view or anything, because it's so everything is biased, right? It's really, what do you have to say about this? And then someone else brings up a new topic, and you get off topic and you spiral, and you get to hear everybody's points of view. And sometimes we all affirm each other, and other times you have a serious discussion where, someone brings up one point, someone has a counterpoint, and someone has a completely new point, says, well, I agree with parts from both of you. And it makes you think a little more when it's your friends who are saying this, more than just like some newspaper lecturing you. And it can be a really fun time. We had a meeting right after the last, the first presidential debate, which might be the only presidential debate. And we were all so eager to talk about it. We had an emergency meeting and we just talked about it for like 2 hours and really just got to see what people thought about different issues that were covered and the party platforms and things like that. And it exposes you to points of view you wouldn't have otherwise, because college students think differently than the news or the newspapers, and you have different perspectives, and sometimes they're less educated, but they're the perspectives we have, and the perspectives we have to consider. And that's the really fun part about the club and how we interact.
Great. Emily makes a really interesting point here. I gave my class, Stephanie, a homework to attend virtual town hall meetings or virtual platforms, and that kind of gives them an opportunity to hear constructive dialogue about issues. They're not physically present, but they have a voice. And Emily said, where there's different fields and different biases, I always advocate to all my students when it comes to politics, please respect. I may not agree with you on a policy, but we should be able to respect each other in that platform. So one of the things, Stephanie, you mentioned about how do I get my kids engaged, whether doing research or we can't go to obviously meetings anymore, but to get into the virtual platform meetings and hear what the candidates have to say, hear what the Broward County mayor has to say on whatever issues he's addressing, and be able to participate, ask a question. You have a fundamental right to ask questions. You may not get the right answer, but obviously you can make a judgment. Most politicians, slip and slide from tough issues, but be able to ask these questions. And I remember this last week having a dialogue, a conversation with my class at Broward College, fascinating students. A couple of the kids came from the Stoneman Douglas High School where the shooting took place some couple of years ago, and they were concerned about gun rights. And here's a bunch of 18-year-old kids who began to simply form a social interest group to talk about gun rights in this country. So get engaged, do the research, go to town hall meetings, ask the questions. That's the best way, I think, to garner research on who you like, what you like, and exercise that fundamental right, which is the right to vote. I think it's a good point you make, Emily, of getting that dialogue across. And that club needs to be probably a campus-wide club, because I don't think we have it at the central campus. I'm not sure if we do.
We did actually last year. Again, club involvement will always change from term to term. So absolutely, you never know what a new year will bring us and what clubs will want to be, active, and which ones will kind of sit a term out. So we've been blessed across the college to have, whether it's something as clear as what North has right now, which is the Political Science Association, but to have students who literally form working groups and talk about these ideas and talk about issues that are happening, like I said, whether they're in our backyard or whether it's something that's happening, across the country.
And we could invite them, and I could probably try and strengthen that group at the central campus now with you guys, and get our congressman to come on campus, have a chance to dialogue with our students about minimum wage. I know Emily talked about minimum wage. I think it's mind-boggling to me that we have so many poor people in this country, especially in South Florida, and we are having a constructive debate here, whether we raise the minimum wage. And I'm sitting here, why are we having a debate? That's a no-brainer. We want everyone in this country to live, within their means and to be successful. So to have a debate whether we increase the minimum wage, I am a bit baffled and confused. I know in Connecticut it's $13 an hour. That's our minimum wage. So it should be the same in South Florida. And this is why it's important. I think, Stephanie, you talked about engagement of students at Broward College, whether it's a political science club, whether it's a Black Lives Matter club. We want our students to be involved in the process, to be aware of issues. We may not agree on these issues, but at least just bring attention to some of the things that happen on campus. Get the vote out, get registered to vote. Go to town hall meetings, listen to Emily and those amendments you talked about. That's a major issue coming up in November 3rd. Whether we increase the minimum wage for Floridians. Most of my students work for minimum wage, and they complain in class that, I don't vote because my vote doesn't count. Well, here's the most perfect example that what Stephanie and Emily raised when it comes to the minimum wage and that amendment in the Florida Constitution. Must be addressed.
Absolutely. And I think, you hit on something really important, which is, again, the awareness piece.
Yes.
We always hope that what follows awareness is action. It doesn't always. And so I think that for us, ground zero is always at least that educational platform where our students are learning more about what's happening, about things that can impact them directly. And at least that's the thing that we want to kind of drive home and bring to them is the awareness of these issues and becoming educated about them.
And we need a leader. We need a professor to lead the students, to guide the Political Science Association, to invite the governor or maybe one of our congressmen to come on campus. We as students with voices, we have a serious concern what's taking place, and we like to hear what your solutions are. So we have to be very proactive. Most of my students sit and they don't vote. Why? Because they don't care. It doesn't work for them. And I've often said that's a very poor excuse for not exercising your fundamental right. Oh, I was busy. Oh, you could do the absentee ballot. You could do this. You could have done that. And so there's early voting. Some states, some 24 states have early voting. The rate started already. And there are millions of Americans who are exercising their fundamental right. So I think leadership is very important, Stephanie and Mr. Emily. I think getting students involved and getting them, obviously, I think, motivated. I try to convey to my students, I have 40 kids in one class, and almost half was registered to vote when I started teaching August 21st. And by September 15, they all were registered to vote because I began motivating them. This is something we need to do. This is a no-brainer. What is wrong with registering? It takes you 10 seconds to get local town and download the application and mail it back in. So I think you mentioned obviously this awareness. I think that needs to be really addressed, especially in college campuses like Broward, where we serve a different type of community. We have non-traditional students, we have older students, young students, and obviously we need to really connect with them. I think Emily's club is obviously very important and it should be in all campuses.
Absolutely. And actually, that kind of leads me into my last question for the both of you, just to share any last minute advice that you have for our students. That's, like I said, where the election date is rapidly approaching. There are always mixed emotions. It doesn't matter what election season it is. So like I said, any last piece of advice that you have for our viewers today?
I'll let Emily first. She goes first.
I probably have two. The first would be ballotpedia.com. Sounds kind of crazy, but they're really good at just summing up everything on the ballot, all of the races. And so, if you don't want to go in there and be like, who are these two people running for this random seat for the Florida legislature? They'll help you in just 2 seconds and you'll know, and you'll be able to make a more educated decision. And the other is, voting, we touched on it earlier, is a bit more of a tenuous process this year. It might not be totally safe to go to the polling locations. And if it is, it's going to take longer with the CDC guidelines, and vote by mail. People aren't super assured about that. But you can fill out your vote by mail ballot, your absentee ballot, and drop it off at a polling location. And that will guarantee that vote gets counted. But you don't have to put yourself at the risk of your ballot not getting there or you having to wait in line. And it's kind of a best of both worlds. So if you're worried about that, it's a really good alternative that I urge everyone to consider.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. I was clearly excited, Stephanie, to be obviously with such a young scholar, Emily. I'm honored to even have a conversation with you. I hope I see you some of my classes here at Broward College next summer, hopefully on campus. I think one of the things I like to convey to my students at the commencement of every semester, whether here in Connecticut or in Florida, I'm always excited to talk about politics. Always excited to get kids motivated, understand the Constitution, our fundamental rights we have as a democracy in the United States. But as I make progress during the semester, I'm always disappointed how kids get frustrated with our political process. And I understand the challenges we have in the United States. I understand the challenges we have in South Florida, and it can be very frustrating. Sometimes the little man is never heard. But I think our vote does count. Every vote counts. Emily said that there's no reason why we should not participate in the political process, whether it's an absentee ballot, whether it's joining that line, or whether it's mailing the ballot in. I'm quite sure, I'm quite confident, as I said earlier, there are issues and problems with mail-in ballots, but that will be solved, that will be corrected. All 20 million plus votes will be counted. We have extra days to count those votes. So there is no reason why in a democracy as great as we are in the United States, in a college as great as Broward College that obviously emphasize the political process, why we should not get out and vote. Please get out and vote, take advantage of it, and exercise your fundamental right in the greatest democracy in the world, the United States of America. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining us and for sharing, like I said, not just tips and tricks for our students, but honestly, like I said, just a heartfelt thoughtfulness regarding what's going on right now in our nation, and how important it is, like we said, to drive the awareness and then to have the action follow it and to have our students vote. And as always, thank you, Seahawks, for tuning in. Please be sure to join us also for next week's Student Live as we kind of discuss campus safety across our colleges. Thanks and have a great day. Bye.